Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7's Israel at War update, and we're currently in the 9th day. And without further ado, I'd like to immediately turn to TV7's editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Oren, who is currently in the central city of Tel Aviv. Amir, what can you tell us about the latest developments pertaining to this war?
So, Jonathan, let me be, first of all, more precise, not only in central Israel, but in Jaffa, which is, of course, part of Tel Aviv. But the point is, Jaffa is heavily Arabic. Some neighborhoods are almost exclusively Arab. And this does not hamper Hamas when it tries to target the Tel Aviv area. It indiscriminately launches rockets at Arab as well as Jewish neighborhoods. And it is only falling to the good graces of the air defense capabilities of Israel's Air Force to intercept the missiles which do not know an Arab from a Jew. So this is just to remind audiences who don't really understand that Hamas doesn't care whether the victims are Jewish or Arab. Now, a week ago, the question we all had was, what went wrong? Today, the question is, what are they or we waiting for? What is the delaying factor making the expected Israeli ground maneuver into Gaza waiting for, who knows, Godot? And apparently, we are waiting for Secretary of State Blinken to come over and once again talk with Prime Minister Netanyahu and his war cabinet so that all parties concerned will know where we are headed and whether Blinken has any headway in trying to forge some formula which will at least minimize the suffering. So for the time being, the focus is on the northern border, where Hezbollah is either trying to goad Israel into a first strike, or at least to harass Israel so that it is distracted between two fronts.
Indeed. Well, I think it's very important to highlight the fact that following his trip here to Israel to meet, of course, with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and other senior officials in Jerusalem, Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State of the United States, traveled both to Saudi Arabia as well as to Qatar. In Qatar, he met with his counterpart, and following his departure, lo and behold, the Iranian Foreign Minister, Hossein Amir Abdullahian, also traveled to Qatar in order to consult with his Qatari counterpart. Both voiced, obviously, their lines of rhetoric, condemning Israel, attacking Israel time and again, and to take into context the fact that the Hamas's political leadership is in Doha, the capital of Qatar. It obviously echoes quite loudly. But let's provide first a operational update to the latest developments pertaining to the war. Mr. Oren already provided some overview, but more concretely, joining us, of course, from an undisclosed location is Brigadier General in Reserve Doron Gavish, who is the commander of Israeli Air Force Task Force for Air and Missile Defense. Thank you for joining us, General. Could you provide us immediately what is currently happening across the various sectors?
Thank you, Jonathan. We've talked about it basically in our previous shows, and it is really important to highlight that we are still looking on a few main efforts. The main effort, the one effort is, of course, containing the south part of Israel. This is already behind us, controlling the board. The board is fully controlled. The area is contained. So this is the first day, and it is the parallel to this. The Israeli Air Force mainly, but also naval forces and artillery are striking in the Gaza Strip. Again, we are highlighting the targets are Hamas. It is not the Palestinian people. It is not the people who live there. It is the Hamas targets. And of course, Israel asked the people to evacuate those areas because we don't want to hit civilians. By the way, we all know also that the Hamas is asking them not to move from there because he wants them as his human shields. And as Amir mentioned before, they don't really care if it is Arab, Israel, is their people, our people. They see only their own interests. So this is in this area, and of course, much more important is to say that the IDF is continuously preparing himself for a ground maneuver. This needs, of course, decision made by the Israeli cabinet. And I want to say again, we've talked about it more than once lately. We are not rushing into the fight. So I don't think that, here in TV7 we have to talk in terms of delay or something like. There is no delay. There is a plan. There is the best time to do what is needed to do. There are all kind of options that are being taken into consideration. So really, let's not talk on those terms. It's there. It would be done in the right time in the IDF for the IDF. Of course, parallel to this, we're looking into the north, and we still see some atrocities made by the Hezbollah terrorists in the northern part of Israel. They're trying to shoot some rockets here and there, some UAVs that are trying to go in. It looks like under the war threshold from their point of view, but of course we are preparing ourselves to something which could be much larger than this. We don't hope for it, but we are preparing ourselves. So ground forces are deployed, air forces deployed, air defense is deployed, and we saw even today, a few minutes ago, we saw some rockets that were shot toward an area, a town in the northern part of Israel, and all of them were intercepted by the warriors of the air defense with the Iron Dome, and the other rockets went to what we call open area. So it is there, and we are looking in order to make sure that it's not deteriorating to a full-scale war. We don't want it, but we are preparing to this, and of course to the east. We all the time speak here about the cooperation that we have with the United States. We have from the Fifth Fleet and from the Sixth Fleet, we have some naval means in our area. The Ford ship is already here in operational position, and the discussions between CENTCOM, EUCOM, and the IDF are being done in all levels. We are cooperating, we are coordinating, and so this is important to say that it is not that the means are there, the commanders are talking to each other, and we are preparing ourselves also for this if needed. So I would say that this is in general where we are standing, and but probably more to come. It's not the end of it. The IDF is very determined to win this war. We heard the Chief of Staff, we heard the Air Force Commander. The morale is high, the deterrence is the decisiveness is there, and more to come on this.
Indeed. With regard to the timing of the invasion, when and if it's going to happen, and in what capacity, obviously, I think Hezbollah also expected it to happen a lot sooner. So did Iran, and so did Hamas. So any moment that passes, obviously, challenges their capacity to withstand whatever currently the Israeli Air Force and artillery are unleashing on terror infrastructure in the Hamas-controlled Gaza Strip. When we're talking about the American involvement, of course, the Gerald R. Ford strike group is currently deployed in the Eastern Mediterranean, not far from Cyprus, with an entire fleet. It's not one vessel, it's a number of vessels with a lot of firepower, with a lot of capabilities, obviously, to target whatever is necessary. And the third point that I think is very important to highlight, the Americans are also working to try and get American citizens out of the Gaza Strip. Something that already there was an attempt yesterday with the Hamas terror organization blocking it, according to U.S. the National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, who made that report to CNN. Now, joining us also is Brigadier General in Reserve Yossi Kuperwasser, who is the former Director General of the Ministry of Strategic Affairs, as well as the commander in the Intelligence Directorate of the IDF of Research and Assessment, among a long list of other positions, which we won't go through the entire curriculum vitae, or we'll stay here all day long. General Kuperwasser, thank you so very much for taking out of your very busy schedule, obviously, to also update our viewers. Could you provide us what do you currently see on the various arenas? We saw also a strike, the second such strike in Syria within less than 48 hours. Is there something developing in that arena, also vis-a-vis, of course, the Lebanese sector and the chief target in question, the Gaza Strip?
Well, what's happening is that there is a war between the Iranian-led axis that is comprised also from Hezbollah and Hamas against the axis that is Israel and the Western world, free world. That is the war that's being fought right now. There are different levels of intensity of the war in different places, but this is the war that we are involved in. And that's why the United States and the UK are here with us on that war, because they understand that this is the war. It's not only about Israel. And the Hamas, on behalf of the Iran axis, has perpetrated a really monstrous terror attack against Israelis, and thought that since the West is very weak, building on its performance vis-a-vis Iran, and Israel is very weak, building on its performance vis-a-vis Hezbollah, and building on all the other problems that Israel faces recently at home, they thought that this is the time is ripe for changing the equation, as they called it, and forcing Israel, just like it was ready to give all kinds of significant capitulations to Hezbollah in the Gaza deal. There is now an opportunity to force on Israel to give all kinds of capitulations for the Palestinians. Unfortunately for them, fortunately for us, we were able to regain control of the territory they were operating in. It took us a while, but we made it quite efficiently. And we are ready to retaliate in a way that they didn't envisage in my mind. They thought that because Israel is weak, the Israeli retaliation will be more like previous many operations, and we shall finish it by having Hamas in power in Gaza, and that they will be able to rearm themselves, and everything will be just as always, and maybe they will gain something out of the confrontation. The fact now is that Israel, with the support of the Western world, is going to take away from the Iran-led axis a very precious asset, which is Gaza. Now, they are trying their best in order to deter us from doing that. And we are trying to make sure that once we do that, we do it in the most appropriate way and the best way. We have to do it also by the book, because the Americans and because of ourselves intention to work according to the law of war and according to international humanitarian law. And that's why we want the population in Gaza not to be harmed. And this takes a little bit of time. And everybody understands that the ground incursion is going to be the turning point of this confrontation. Because once we move, Hamas cannot hold eventually. I mean, it's going to be painful, it's going to be costly, it's going to be difficult, but eventually Hamas is going to lose. And this is a strategic change of the highest degree. So the Iranians and Hezbollah are trying to convince us not to do that. And that's why they raise the tensions in the other arenas of this war, mainly in Lebanon. And we see a gradual increase in the tension, gradual escalation, and the threats that if we move on the ground, they might consider something that is much bigger than what they did so far. They have a very complicated calculus to make, because on the one hand, they really don't want to lose Gaza, but they are not sure that if they do anything, it's going to prevent us from taking Gaza away. And on the other hand, the prices they are going to pay are very heavy anyhow. Israel is ready to hit them hard, even if it's involved in a war in Gaza. And the Americans are here, and the Lebanese population doesn't want to fall prey to this intention of Nasrallah to put Lebanon in harm's way. So it's a very complicated situation for Nasrallah. I don't think he's made up his mind. And I think that the only way to diffuse this situation, and that is something that time can give some possibility to, is if Hamas decides to, and because what Hamas is doing is they can fight a heroic battle in Gaza, but lose eventually, or they can diffuse the entire thing by saying, okay, we're going out, we're leaving, let us go.
Indeed.
And the time is that we are now seeing moving is for them to chew this opportunity if they want to. So far, I don't see any sign that they want to. But this means that eventually we shall have to move and cause terrible destruction in Gaza because we are going to fight from home to home. And anyhow, one thing is clear: once we finish this war, the Iranian-led Axis is going to suffer the repercussions of what it did, and Israel is going to be left with Gaza, which is another problem for the future.
Indeed. Well, there are 2 points that I would like to make since I saw some chatter about this with regard to our updates. Rest assured, anything discussed here is not something that has not been public knowledge. We're not unveiling any modus operandi or classified intelligence that would somehow assist the enemy. That's not the case here. Now, the second point that I'd like to refer to, Mr. Amir Oren, we heard both General Kuperwasser as well as General Gavish speaking about the fact that Israel is not interested in harming the Gazan population. There are rules of war. It's very eager to operate within the framework of international law when it comes to that, not for the sake of Hamas, but for the sake of ourselves, because we see this as something very important to save human lives, regardless if they like us or not. Let's take within this context the assessment that they don't like us very much. But putting that aside, you went yesterday to hear the voice of the families of those that have been kidnapped by the brutal Hamas terrorists into the Gaza Strip. There are different things occurring today. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with the families also, and there were some discussions to update them on what is being done behind closed doors. What can you tell us about this? Obviously, it's a very sensitive issue.
So this is also one of the main points that President Biden's administration, spearheaded by Secretary Blinken, in what is becoming his shuttle here. Maybe he will also go back from Israel to the Gulf to continue his conversations. There is right now a distinction between the actual and the potential. The actual is the fight between Israel and Hamas, and the fact that the hostages, as far as we know, after being kidnapped, some of them were killed during the abduction or on the way. As far as we know, they have not been harmed over the last week or so because they are kept as bargaining chips by Hamas. And what Blinken and his colleagues in the administration would like to do is create a firewall between the actual and the potential. The potential being the conflagration into other fronts and, God forbid, harm being done to the hostages, which is why they will probably try to see whether there is any outline for a possible deal between Hamas and Israel, brokered by Qatar, Turkey, others, indirectly Egypt, Saudi Arabia, with, of course, some pressure by the United States. We are not there yet, but this is an emerging issue which right now may overshadow what is happening on the ground.
Indeed. General Gavish, I'd like also to take this opportunity to ask you about the rocket fire, particularly from Lebanon. That is, we saw a number of anti-tank missiles, being shot at a number of military bases along the border, as well as you already mentioned the 10 projectiles that were fired towards the densely populated area of Nahria. What can you tell us about that more from a perspective when we look at the situation? Is this something that you expect to intensify in the near future? What is Hamas's calculus at this stage?
Of course, we see the Hamas trying to act below a war threshold. This could see by what they are doing, and but we are preparing to, and the Israeli IDF is preparing himself to all other options that could come out of this area and of the Hamas. Of course, we have to be very modest in thinking what they will do and estimating what they will do. We were surprised once. There is no place to be surprised again. So everything is ready for all options. Up to now, this is what we see. In the last few days, we see, as you said, some anti-tanks here and there, few rockets, UAVs. And it looks that this is what is happening during the last days. It doesn't say nothing about tomorrow. So, of course, everyone has to be prepared. There are not too much estimation. It's just looking and seeing what is happening. Of course, all the analysts are looking at it. Intelligence is looking at it. But from the operational point of view, again, we have to be modest and not to be surprised. So to be ready for all options. And all options could be a full war, which again we don't like it, but this could be, and we know the doctrine of the Hamas. We know what they are planning, as much as for their ideas what to do here in Israel, and we are trying to be prepared to it, and also to any other surprises that might come.
Of both Hamas and Hezbollah, for that matter. General Kupelwasser, I'd like to ask you, there are roughly 4 minutes left for today's update, and therefore, with regard to the arenas that could be dragged into a multi-sector war, which Israel has been preparing for the last couple of years now, we obviously have Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, potentially even Iran proper. What can you tell us about that from a holistic perspective? Do you see movements? We hear a lot of rhetoric coming out of all those places, but is there actual movement right now in preparations to confront Israel?
Yes, there are preparations. I see it in Iraq. I see it in Syria. We can see it, I guess, also if we look at what's happening with the Houthis in Yemen and things like that. Everything is boiling, and there are movements of forces from Iranian proxies from northern Syria to southern Syria. There are a lot of things happening simultaneously, because this is, as I said, the war between this axis and Israel and its supporters. That is the war, and that's why everybody understands that this is the time for them to get ready, to be prepared, and to intervene. Not only in those arenas, also in the Palestinian territories, in the Judea and Samaria, Palestinian-controlled territories. There's a lot of action over there, and we see supporters of Hamas also causing havoc in places like Jordan. So the entire area is really unstable, and God knows how it's going to develop once Israel moves on the ground. What needs to happen is a very clear victory of Israel to deter all these other players, and I hope this is going to be achieved. But as I said previously, this is it's not going to be necessarily that fast and not necessarily that decisive immediately. Eventually, we shall take over Gaza. That I'm quite confident of, and I hope this will deter everybody else from playing around with us. But for the time being, they are going to do everything in order to deter us from doing that. And it's not only them. Everybody else also doesn't like this idea. Even if they want us to win, they don't want us to go all the way to the winning. It's because the Jordanians are worried about what's going to happen to them and the potential instability. The Egyptians are worried about the refugees moving into Egypt. Everybody is worried about this such a strong shock to the strategic situation that was established by the Iranians and that everybody lived with and accepted until it exploded in our face.
Indeed. Well, as you noted, prospects of miscalculation are at an all-time high, and that is something that we need to take into account. Every small spark can turn into a wide-scale blaze, and that is something that at least Israel wants to avoid. I'm not sure about the rest. But this is unfortunately all the time that we have for today. There is just one sentence left for each of you. So in one sentence, what should we look at for the next 24 hours? Mr. Oren?
What General Kuperwasser just described is correct, of course, but it also works the other way around. During this time of tension, Israel can also operate in some areas where it wouldn't take the risk usual.
General Gavish?
I would like to echo General Kuperwasser. I think that instability, this is what we are seeing now. And we have to be ready to all the options that could come out of it. And this is, and of course, preparing ourselves to our own plan. At the end of the day, Israel is decisive, and the idea of winning is there. There is no other chance. We just can't do anything other than winning it.
General Kuperwasser?
I would say one word: internal unity. We have to be united. It's very difficult to fight a war when you are divided from within. We managed to unite, and this was a surprise for our enemies. And we have to remain united and to put all the questions about what happened before behind us and move forward to victory.
Indeed. Well, this is all the time that we have for today. I'd like to thank Mr. Oren, General Gavish, and General Kuperwasser for being part of today's update. And I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. And until our next update from here in Jerusalem, Shalom.
I'm Eran Etzion, former Deputy National Security Advisor here in Israel, a diplomat, a strategist by training. I'm very happy to be at TV7 and offer my interpretation along my esteemed colleagues. The strong point of TV7 is to be a reliable source of authoritative insight in an era of shallow news environment that is very difficult for viewers to trust.